Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's the Full 40 with Chris and Willy, part of the Stay Tuned Network. Jesus, that was like a year plus ago. Part of the Nova Insider Network. It is Monday. Sorry, I'm still lost as to what day it is of the week, but it's Monday, January 2nd at 8:20 p.m. We are recording this after the UConn and Marquette losses and 48 hours or so, or a little bit less than 48 hours or so before we tip off versus Georgetown and get to play the game of Georgetown roulette that everyone seems to have to be able to have to deal with. So with that all being said, we wanted to get out a quick-ish podcast. Now we might actually do another one before Xavier. I just have to see if I can swing it with a Xavier with one of the Xavier podcast guys. So we'll figure that out as it goes. But for now, we're going to cover the kind of the week that was, touch a little bit on Georgetown, and then go from there. So I guess what I feel like from Christmas to New Year's, like everything changed again for the Villanova program. Like we had just gotten run off of winning 5 in a row, including our Big East home opener. We blew the doors off of St. John's, and we go into Christmas and feeling good about Villanova basketball and like heading in the right direction. And then, right, like anyone who knows college basketball, period, understands that the UConn game is in all certainty going to be a loss, which we should not freak out over, because that's just what you do. You're going to lose to the number 2 team on their home court. And that number 2 team was also number 1 in KenPom and number 1 in every advanced metric. That's a team that you lose to. I don't care if we were number 5 in the country, we were going to lose that game. Okay. So that was my kind of take, and I think that was most people's take, except the way the game played out, we were actually kind of in it, and so people got mad that we ended up losing, which I feel like is just kind of like so counterintuitive. It's like oh, we're a victim of our own, of exceeding our own expectations, in that we were in that game, had it down to 2 points with 3 minutes left, had it a 2-possession game under a minute, and that was up until they played at Xavier, which, by the way, you lose games on the road in conference play versus ranked opponents. But I felt like, hey, you know what? That's a pretty good result. Like, to lose by 8 at that point in time wasn't a terrible result. Am I calling it a moral victory? No, because we don't have time for moral victories this year. But still, I didn't have a big takeaway from the UConn game. Our net and our KenPom, the advanced metrics all showed continued improvement. No one on planet Earth, from like a committee or other standpoint, would have expected us to win that game. I think we showed out better than we would have expected. And so that was kind of that game. And I gotta be honest with you, I didn't really think a whole lot of it.
I didn't think about it at all. Honestly, I was like, I watched a little bit of the game, and I looked at it. I saw the result. I didn't watch the end, but I saw the result, and I was like, oh, that's actually like better. And I think texted you guys too, like, wow, that was actually better than I thought it was going to be. Like, yeah. I had no problems with that game, like, whatsoever.
Yeah, it was definitely, I sneakily hoped we could pull out the win. I knew we would show. I expected us to lose by less than 10. Like, that was my thing. I was like, I think we're actually going to show up and play well. We showed up and played well. There was nothing during the UConn game. I wasn't pissed off. It was just kind of like, all right, like, we're in here, we're hanging on, we have a lead. I was a little bit frustrated, and where I knew we probably had lost it was we came out in the second half. We jumped out to like a 4-point lead, And I was like, okay, well, this is a little bit different. If we continue a run here, then maybe I'm having a different conversation with myself about my expectations for this game. UConn came back, figured it out, and went on like an 11-2 run. And then they basically controlled it from there. And I was like, all right, well, that was slightly annoying, but I don't expect perfection going into a game. We played 85% a great game, 15% not that good, but you have to play 99% versus UConn. They're just that good.
Especially at their place.
Yeah, especially at home. Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, right, like look, the story of that game was the turnovers. We were a mess with the basketball, inbounding the ball. They ratcheted up the pressure, and we were a freaking disaster. And that was both on our veterans and our freshmen. And that's just like something that can't happen. Now, granted, give a lot of credit to UConn because I felt like they kind of were the ones who forced that issue.
Yeah.
They're super athletic. They're long. They got very good hands, and so they disrupted a lot of our action throughout the. I'm not hearing a tapping, Willie. Sorry, Willie's pinging the chat here. I am not hearing a tapping, but cool. If I could also be causing the tapping, so I don't know. But that being said,
yeah, cool. Might just be a me thing.
But that being said, I didn't, beyond the turnover bit, right? Like I didn't have a whole lot of takeaways there. I felt like, okay, I generally feel okay about it. Like that was the game I knew we were going to lose, like moving on to Marquette. Then we got to talk about Marquette, right?
That's the thing. Coming out of that game, we lost it. I actually felt good. And I was like, if we play like we played here, we should beat Marquette at home easily. Not
and
easily,
then go on a little bit of a run.
And then go on a run. That was the Marquette game was the, all right, we showed improvement versus UConn. We played 5 straight games. We'd won 5 straight. We showed improvement versus UConn. Hey, we're not that bad. We can go to the number 2 team in the country, hang with them, have a chance to take the lead at the under 4. Cool, build on that. We built on that versus Marquette for, I would say, a half, maybe a half and like a little and change, and then the last 12 minutes of that game happened.
So I kind of need to get context from you, right? Like I need context from you guys. You guys watched the game. So as I made very clear on Twitter, it was my sister's wedding, beautiful wedding. I gave a great speech, if I don't say so myself. But I was literally in the church for the first half, on the party bus for the second half, couldn't see what was going on. So I don't have context for this game. I have context for social media because I had some downtime and was kind of reading the notifications on social media, and I have a lot to say about that. Yeah, but like Villanova Twitter and the Villanova fan base, we got talk, right? Like, yeah. but I need to have better context first of the game. So Willy, Rachel, give me that context.
For anyone who doesn't know, I was the one tweeting on, what is that, Saturday, Sunday? I don't even remember. Saturday. So I was the one tweeting on Saturday, and I really we started Cam, which I thought was a good update, a positive sign. So
let's start there. So it was Cam. Did Armstrong fall out of the starting lineup?
Armstrong fell out. Yeah.
He fell out. Okay. But he came off the bench. Him and not Brizzy, sorry, on the mind, but RIP Brizzy. Him and Longino came off the bench, and I actually thought they gave us really good energy and spark off the bench, because Marquette and Shaka Smart are obviously a very active team. They were playing really well on defense. They basically locked Dixon down. Dixon didn't, I don't remember the exact total because I'm not a metrics person and I wasn't looking at the box score, but I don't think Dixon, he maybe had 10 points. They really did a good job of locking Dixon down. And even with that, we go into halftime with a 5-point lead. We played really well. We played good defense to Chris Arch's credit. He wasn't a deficit on defense. Kyle Neptune seemed to be doing a bit of a offense thing with him and Longino, which is kind of normally how he treats Chris anyway. And the only thing that I think was a little strange in the first half, and it continued for the rest of the game, was it seemed like Kyle was using like 3 different guards, like 3 different guys to like bring up the ball throughout the game, which was interesting, but like, you know, you do what you got to do to win the game. So I didn't have a problem with it necessarily. Cam and Longino were pretty and Mark were all pretty explosive in the first half. So like overall, the first half I felt good. I was like, oh great, like this is gonna be awesome. Like I was like, we actually were out rebounding them. We like out rebounded them like 20-10 in the first half. So that was a really good sign too, right? Like we're out rebounding a fast Marquette team that likes to run. Like if we out rebound them, they can't get out in transition as much. And so like we did a really good job of that too. I think it's the second half where we came out of the second half and they kind of, you know, gave us their best punch. Like I think they went on like an 11 and something run or 11-0, 11-2 run, something like that coming out of the first half. So they evened up the score and take the lead. And then it's really like the second half of the second half, like that last like 10 to 12 minutes, that was like a little bit of a shit show. Yeah. And in the sense that for some reason, with like 7-8 minutes left, Kyle Neptune takes out Cam and takes out Mark Armstrong, who are really the only 2 like explosive players we had on the court, like creating offense on their own. We got into that weird iso ball thing that we like to do when we're like, we don't know what to do and we're trying to get the lead back. And then Kyle never put Cam or Mark back in, like until there was like 30 seconds left in the game and we basically had no chance to win. So that was the part where I was like, what was that? But the refs also, it was like a very low foul game. They let them play. They didn't call a lot of fouls. So like maybe there just wasn't an opportunity outside of taking a timeout and subbing somebody in.
I'm not sure about that.
But I'm saying maybe. Like I'm not saying there wasn't. I'm saying maybe. But like overall, it was really that last like 7-8 minutes where I was like, why didn't we put them back in? Like where are the guys that were scoring? Like put the guys who were putting the ball in the hoop and making baskets. It's like in the game, name of the game, like put them back in the game. Like, why are they sitting on the bench? But, you know, I don't know. I'm not Kyle. So I don't know if Willie wants to weigh in on that too, but that was my biggest question mark was like, what are we doing that last 7-8 minutes? Like, why were those decisions made?
Yeah. When I like think about it overall, Rachel did a great job of breaking it down to kind of the 4 quarters of the game. That first quarter of the game, that first 10 minutes is Cam. The impact of Cam starting was very visible immediately. Cam was comfortable. The team was comfortable. We looked better. We flowed better. Offense was moving a little bit better. It's been interesting. We're, I think, a top 20 offense on Ken Palm. If you watch us, it doesn't feel like it. At any point during the year, does it feel like we look like a top 20 offense?
No, it doesn't. But for a while, I thought, oh, that's just last year's offense data coming in. But now 14 games
we're just that good of an offense still, even though it doesn't make sense.
Because we're just slow tempo, but we score more.
We score efficiently there. Yeah. And so but to get to the point of the first 10 minutes, it felt a little bit more fluid. There was a couple plays where, Mark was able to wiggle his way into the lane, dump it off to Cam. Cam made his first basket or like his first dunk on a cut where he was being a player, I forget who it was, overplaying a little bit and was playing a little bit closer to Caleb. Cam cut back door, Caleb hit him. It was like the first time that I was like, oh, this offense is like moving and passing the ball crisply.
And there was also a really good play. Like it was like the first 5 minutes of the game where it was like pass, inside lane pass where we don't normally do. Like we stretch the floor out and then collapse back in, where I feel like normally we pass it in, collapse the defense in, and then kick out. Yeah. And it was like the opposite of what we do. It was like Dixon to Cam to Mark, and it was like so clean, so pretty, so fast. And I that's the point at which I was like, okay, like that's I looked at that, I was like, Villanova basketball. Like, thank you guys. Like we're getting it. We got it.
Yeah. And so that's where it looked good. And I was like happy about that. The second half of the first half was just good basketball, but getting to the main point of the issue here being that the second half of the second half, the last 10 minutes, that's where, I mean, Cam goes to the bench, Mark goes to the bench, and we fell back into our old habits of ISO ball, or where Dixon's trying to back down. If Dixon can't back down, he holds it too long. We give it to Caleb, and Caleb crosses over, pulls a three. If he's making it, fantastic. He wasn't particularly, he was like 3 for 9. He wasn't particularly like on, but we had a lot of that, and the offense just became stale and uninspired. And like the issue was there was no one on the floor who could remedy that. And the issue was we had the people who could remedy that on the bench, which are the 2 freshmen. And this is probably the first game that I will put directly on the head of Kyle Neptune. I think every other game, there's other issues. Cam wasn't in. UConn, we were on the road.
And it was UConn, right?
Yeah, and it's UConn, yeah. And the PK85, like it was a whole mess. There's a lot of blame. There's all blame to be shared everywhere, all around. Coming out of this Marquette game, there's nothing wrong with any player that I felt made a wrong decision. It wasn't like anybody played particularly bad. It was we played well enough to win. We just didn't execute. And that wasn't from like we're not executing our game plan. It was, frankly, our game plan was, I think, misaligned. And that starts at Kyle. I'm sure assistant coaches also have a lot of blame on that, but Kyle's the one with the paycheck that's saying he's the head coach of the Villanova men's basketball team. I put it on Kyle.
The other weird thing that I can't, like, I'm still thinking about too, to add even more context, like the other weird thing was there were several trips down in a row in the second half. Like I'm thinking like 4 or 5 plays in a row, I think, where we pass that got really late in a shot clock. Like, to Marquette's credit, they were playing good defense. Like they played the kind of defense we were playing in the first half, and they played the kind of defense that like we needed to continue to play if we wanted to win this game, which we knew was going to be a little closer than we'd like it to be. But we would get late in a shot clock, and then I don't know if people are just like, we don't know what to do, so we're just going to pass it back out to Eric because he's just kind of like floating at the top of the 3-point line. But Dixon would take these shots that were clearly out of his range. Like he's like 3-4 steps back from the 3-point line. I didn't understand why he didn't just, like, every shot he took like was short and it would just bounce off the front of the rim. I'm like, why don't you just dribble 1 step and get a little closer? Like, it's not a point of pride. You're not fucking Steph Curry, excuse my language, but like, you're not Steph. You're never going to be Steph. That's not the kind of player you are. So like, why not step a little closer? And I don't know if it's because he was trying to get get hot from further away so that they didn't he could like draw the defense back out a little bit, but whatever it was doing, it wasn't working. And I'm like, why did we did it like 3-4 times in a row? And I was like, this can't be our plan. Like, this can't be the play that Kyle keeps drawing up. Cause if it is, like, it's not working. And like, they need to fix it.
Part of the thing though, is that, right? Like, so one of the weird things about Villanova basketball relative to a lot of college basketball teams, right, is the fact that we don't really run a ton of plays, right? Like it's all principles based. It's drive and kick. It's just constant action. Like the guys kind of invent as they go. It's one of the reasons why, even though we play a slow pace, that good offensive players like playing in our system, is because we don't make them have a dizzying amount of plays from an offensive standpoint. So like, I doubt Kyle's calling the plays, so to speak, but he's also not putting, but what I'm gathering is that the personnel that he's put on the floor and the general instruction that he's given the team was just off from where we needed to be in order to go down that stretch and win that game at home. Right? Like, the thing that kills me about this game, right? Like, losing to Marquette by 2 in a vacuum is, this Marquette team blew the fuck out of Baylor, right? Like, has probably the second or third best resume in the Big East Conference. Like, they're safely going to make the tournament as we sit here right now, right? Like, there's no shame in losing to Marquette, right? Like, but losing to Marquette at home in a game in which we had a lead decently into the game, right, is the problem here. Like, so like, help me understand kind of like, what is the, like, what precisely did Kyle fuck up? Right? Like, and I buy that he fucked up. I'm just saying, like, what precisely did he do? Or didn't he do?
It's rotation management,
Yep.
which in a vacuum, I have no issue with the way the minutes broke down in a vacuum. But Cam did not play down the stretch. Mark did not play down the stretch. The offense got stagnant. Maybe there wasn't a chance to put people in, but that's on you to manage that. This time, if I'm not mistaken, we actually had the timeouts. Like at the end of the
Yeah,
year, the UConn game.
we had two
Yeah.
timeouts with like a few minutes, like just a couple minutes left.
So we had the opportunity to do this. And I understand of trusting your guys and letting the people that you trust like know how it works. But if Kyle can take a step back, you started Cam because he'd earned that spot. We had seen that. He has earned that starting spot. We know that it's most important to finish games. Why wasn't the person who you'd given a start to finishing that game? Like that just doesn't make sense to me. That if you're willing to trust Cam to start, why isn't he in your finishing lineup? Those are the guys that you go with.
I'll also say that the lack of rotation late in the game, our guys definitely were tired. Like I think we ran out of gas a little bit because we weren't subbing people in for 7-8 minutes, and Marquette was running. Marquette was like, they got into a transition game. We couldn't keep up with them on the defensive end because we were tired, because we weren't subbing in fresh guys who had been on the bench for a few minutes. And not to mention, outside of the fact that those were the guys that were creating the offense to begin with, right? Like, I think that it was really, I think that was the mistake, was like not putting, I know they're freshmen. I know Villanova doesn't trust freshmen. I know Jay, like maybe Kyle listened back to the audio of Jay's rant about freshmen when he called our game. I don't know. And maybe Kyle felt bad about himself or second guess, but like, I also think it's a little hard for Kyle coming in as a new guy to build trust with players. If you're like, hey, I'm going to give you this start, but the second you do anything I don't like, and I don't even know what that was because I thought Cam and Mark both played really well.
I don't think Cam did anything wrong.
I don't think, but like, I think he just took them out and then for whatever reason, like forgot. It's like almost like he forgot to put them back in. And then it was like too late, and putting them in for 30 seconds wasn't going to do anything. And so we ended up having Dixon taken off balance, last minute jump shot.
And that gets to my number 2 with Kyle. It's the late game play.
It's been problematic because if you actually look at sorry, I'm just pausing here for a moment. If you look at it, like we lost close to Michigan State, we lost close to Iowa State, we lost close to
Oregon.
Oregon. Yeah, we lost close to UConn. We lost close to Marquette. We lost close to Temple. Right, like late game execution has been a massive issue. So like I do get, right, like the criticism to a degree. I want to get into that more broadly later on, but like I do get to a degree the criticism of the coaching staff, because a lot of times late game execution is coming out of a timeout, coming out of a sub, coming off a free throw or whatever, where there should be sets. There should be an understanding of like, what are we trying to do defensively? What are the key things? What are the 3 reminders that you got to send out with your team on defense? Like grab that rebound, box out. Like, it sounds like basic shit, but like stuff that you got to make sure that you remind your guys, right? And that shows out when you have a well-coached team. And then on offense, right? Like a competent play that like gets a good look. That look doesn't necessarily need to go down, right? But like has to set up a good look. And
none of them have been good looks. Yeah, none of them have been good looks. And I don't think this is I'm not saying Dixon shouldn't be the person to take the shot. I think it's interesting that in every scenario, I think Dixon took it. In every scenario, we're setting up Dixon to do anything but where he has the biggest advantage, which is in the paint. We're asking him in the Michigan State game to take a fadeaway 3 to win the game. We asked Temple was another close one that we lost. Temple, I almost gave a pass to because Caleb was at the rim, his legs were being held down and he just missed. This game versus Marquette, it was a give it to Dixon with about 9 seconds left. He tried to back his man, which is the right thing to do. He tried to post up and get into the post. And maybe this is a Dixon thing, but there was nothing else was happening outside of it. It was Dixon, figure it out. Dixon turned around, took a fadeaway shot that, Patrick Ewing say, do you practice that shot? When? That classic clip, that's the shot that he took. And I'm not blaming Dixon on anything for that. But it wasn't that great of a look. Bounces around. We don't get it again. I just feel like and this might be Kyle being green behind the ears, there's the late game execution and there's the offense setting up the team to where it goes or where it needs to be. We can give Kyle the excuse of being green around the ears, and that makes complete sense long term. But we are halfway through this season.
Yeah.
And that's the larger issue is I get keep a long-term view, but in a long-term view, our goal isn't let's just miss this season. No, or let's just miss the tournament this season. Our goal should still be somehow to get into the tournament. And with every loss that comes due to a lack of execution, to someone being hurt, to someone X, Y, and Z, our road gets that much tougher. And we can talk about this a little bit later, but we need to win our next 6 games realistically to have a realistic shot at making the tournament. And that's just what it is.
Yeah. And yeah, so right. So let's get into this a little bit. So there's one other point that I want to raise, because this is kind of what I feel like stacked on. There was 3 key things of bad news this week. We hit the UConn loss. We hit the Marquette loss, right? And then we learned that Angelo Brizzi was transferring, right? So and now again, handedly, this is not, to me, a unhealthy program thing to have happen, right? We saw transfers out all the time in the Jay Wright era, right? Right, this kid was he bought into the program, he redshirted, what realistically was a 3-star recruit, and even without Justin Moore in this lineup, which we learned Justin Moore is now in full contact drills, and pretty much a full participant in practice at this point, right? We now are in a situation where it's if he couldn't see the floor yet, there is nothing that's going to happen now that's going to make him see the floor.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, Justin Moore, Jordan Longino, Chris Arcidiacono, and Mark Armstrong are all back next season in theory. Right. Moore might be gone from whatever, but from a eligibility standpoint, all
and
of
Hausen.
them and Hausen are all back next year. Right. So I just feel like Brizzi kind of fell a little bit victim of kind of having the same skills as everybody else or as one other person else and just doing all of it a little bit worse than everybody. And that's not really a hate on the kid or a slam on the kid, but to his point, he said, okay, I don't really feel like I'm going to be able to get on the floor here. Let me move on. The guys on the team had positive things to say about him.
Yeah.
He just decided to move on, to go to a place where he felt like he could play more basketball. And if you don't feel and here's the thing, if you don't feel like you have a potential pro career ahead of you, maybe Deep Europe or whatever, but if you don't feel like you have a pro career ahead of you and you're just sitting there and you're just I want to play basketball because I got 3 years left of this, right?
Yeah.
In my life. And then I have to be a real person, right? And not to say that athletes aren't real people, but you get my point, is that they have to go work some 9-to-5 fucking shit job like all of us do. And that's going to be my life. So I want to play college basketball and actually really play. Right. So I get that. Yeah. Right. But there was an attitude in the fan base that this is, and we got to really hit on this point because we're back at the Chris Arcidiacono conversation again. And I feel like we've moved past that as a
Time
podcast.
Is a flat circle. That's it.
Yes. But yet we can't get ourselves away from this. So this is the root cause of everyone's problem with Neptune and everything, is that I'm getting notifications left and right on Twitter. People are hitting me up, whatever, being Kyle Neptune playing Chris Arcidiacono is the reason Angelo Brizzi left. And I'm well, maybe. But then someone in a reply to me had the actual presence of mind to say maybe it's on Brizzy because he couldn't beat Chris Arcidiacono out for the spot. And I'm like, yeah, maybe it's that, right? Like maybe when the people who are in the coaching staff who have been around this for a very long time and are specifically good at the guard thing, right? Like are looking at it and saying, this guy can't get in the rotation, that maybe that's a sign that like he wouldn't crack it. Like I don't know. To me, I'm just looking at that and saying, like, yeah, sometimes it happens in a program. You're just gonna have a guy who, I didn't say get recruited over, but like Armstrong came in, Justin Moore was obviously gonna stay, and Chris Arcidiacono has continued to improve his game, and then Hausen has a irreplaceable skill in that he on a team that doesn't shoot particularly well is an excellent shooter, and we got to talk about why his minutes have been reduced of late. But that's a neither here nor there story. But like,
there's just no place. Like
there was just no place. There was no place.
And we've already seen. I mean, this happens as the year goes on. Kyle dropped the rotation to 7 by like Oklahoma. By the Oklahoma game, we were already playing like 7 people. Hausen's the 8th fringe person right now, who when Moore comes back, we probably will only see in like literally spot of 3 situations, but there's no place. Trey hasn't seen the floor since, I don't know, Oregon. Like he hasn't seen the floor.
That to me is a bigger question mark than Brizzy. You know what I mean? Like that to me is like I don't know if that's a function of like Jay just not, being kind of checked out by the end of last year because he knew he was going to retire and like just did nothing to develop the kid, or like if he just really doesn't fit the system, like I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say, does he have a bad attitude? Because like, I don't know the guy. So I'm not going to assume that,
no.
But like, I'm not going to assume the worst there at all. Yeah. I don't think it's like a JQ situation at all either. So, I have more questions about than anything.
I would argue that both players are a threat to transfer based on their inability to play to actually get playing time. But the one thing, and I have enough inside ties, not a lot, but like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm getting inside info on this podcast all the time.
Chris is
I have enough. I have enough people who can get in, who could share some noise to know that Patterson and Njoku are like model citizens in the Villanova basketball program.
Yeah, I've got a pretty direct line and nothing but good things to say.
And if they weren't, like, that's the first thing that would get leaked out too. You know completely. What I mean? It's and you would see it because they would be doing stuff on social and they would be saying things that they shouldn't, and they would be like, we've seen it before, so like you would know. Yeah. Right. Like you would know.
So I saw this thread and I want to just kind of like pivot to this just to talk about college basketball as a whole. It was this thread and it was by a former player, college basketball player, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was on Twitter, and he tweeted that like college basketball is hard and it is tough. There are, on any given team, it doesn't matter what your level is, it gets down to about 8 players play. That's just what it is. And of those 8 players, maybe 2 are only truly happy with what their role is and where they feel on the team. Other ones there might be, your 7th man might understand it's a grind and eventually we'll get there. But there are 8 players that play. Every team in the country has at least 11 scholarship players. I would say 10 to 11 scholarship players. So there are 2 to 3 players who have received a scholarship from the school. So who are in theory are a Division I basketball player who just aren't seeing the court. That's what happens in college basketball. It's a tough game to play. There's not enough minutes to go around to give a full line of 10 use them properly. We've seen like only super special teams or like bad teams be able to go 10 deep. Kentucky was able to go to 10 deep because of the platoon system. But even in their platooning days, like it got down to like 8 when it got really got tough for them. And so what we have to look at is like take a step back and just as human beings recognize that like, like you said, Brizzy just wants to play basketball and it doesn't look like it's happening here. And if Brizzy has any shot of getting to the NBA, it's not going to be doing jump stops in Villanova practices and then not being able to figure out and make mistakes on the fly. We've already seen that West Virginia already reached out to Brizzy. There's going to be high major interest to him. He's going to go play at some school, and maybe he'll be great. Maybe he'll be just a role player. Maybe he'll like fall flat on his face. But he's going to go play someplace else. There. Other places are going to want him, and the ability
And
to get on
he'll
the
have
floor.
a better shot. Yeah.
Yeah, and he'll have a better shot. Just like at the end of the day, Cole Swider's on the Lakers because he went to Syracuse, not because he was at Villanova.
Right.
It's
so
because he
funny.
had a
That's
chance
right.
to show other stuff. We can say everything that we want to say about Cole Swider and his Villanova career, but he went to Syracuse, and that's why he's in the NBA right now, not because he went to Villanova.
That's right.
Well, and the other thing too is like you like the way you just described it, Lily. Like I think about it and I go, okay, I was at the company shall remain nameless, but I hated my last job. I honestly sometimes think it was a mistake to even accept the job, right? And so it's like it's the same thing. When I played softball, nowhere near as like high. Like I was close to playing at Villanova, but like I went through the recruiting process, so like that's the extent of my knowledge of like NCAA athletics. But in all of those times I met a coach, the coach would say, "We have a starting nine," right? And like sure that changes a little bit if you're a pitcher because like that you can rotate pitchers a little more frequently but like if you're catching for a game, the likelihood that you get taken out, and that was my position, likelihood you get taken out and like replaced with another player mid-game is slim to none.
Yeah.
Unless you're like a specialist for a specific situation. But the overall point is like every one of these coaches described college athletics to me as a job. They're like, this isn't like your rec league, I want to play and have fun and make friends. Like this is you work your butt off every single day, and it may not even get you where you want to go. And a lot of people, like, if you're unhappy at a job, what do? You look for another job. And to be honest, yes. Is it different now in college athletics because of the transfer portal? 100%. Because of NIL and what schools are able to help their students do while they're at those schools? 100%. And that's a whole extra like layer. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be committing, these guys basically commit probably like 80 hours a week to college basketball. And if you're going to commit that much time and effort, like you want to be, even if it's, no one's ever going to be happy 100% of the time, but you want to have enough moments of happiness and like enjoying the experience so that it outweighs, the grind, but you also want to have enough experience on the court. You want to get enough value out of that time to like set yourself up for success, whatever that is you want to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, I just look at it as like these players, this is a job. People think it's like all fun and games. And like, yeah, to us it is because we're on the outside, like drinking beer and like yelling at the TV. These guys work, like they work. And I feel like a lot of times like that gets lost along with the fact that like they're kids for the most part.
Yeah.
We expect so much from 17 to 22-year-olds for the most part, and it's ridiculous. Like, so anyway.
So I do want to focus on the context though, because the context of the transfer and the context of the UConn loss and the Marquette loss, the
three bad things,
the three bad things, if you will, was Neptune, right? Like, and people being like, man, I got to tell you, man, and I realize that I have some people who are just absolutely fucking insane who I interact with or that show up in the mentions or whatever. And I'm comfortable with that. I know that Twitter isn't real life, but like at the same time, like, man, the interactions of the fan base were pretty ugly, right?
Yeah, I had to log off like pretty quickly after.
Yeah. Like, and I think we just need to get into that a little bit because I'm just like, again, we talked about the Neptune thing after the 2-5 start, right? Like, and I feel like we're 5-2 since then. With the two losses, not being actually terrible losses from a real standpoint, but to your point, Willie, the sun is setting on this season very quickly. and so I think that if you told me after the Oregon game that we go 5-2 in our next 7 and finish 2022 at 7-7, I probably would have signed up for it then.
Yeah.
Because I would have been like, okay, that probably puts us in a position to be in position. And so that's where we are.
Yeah.
Right. At the same time, we really should have been 8-6, right? Like we really needed to be 8-6. And so the Marquette loss at home in particular was just rough. So let's talk about the Kyle thing. Let's actually have this conversation. And it's going to be a little bit of a repeat of last conversation, at least from my end. But like we now have 7 more games of context on Kyle. I can say so far, with like with firm with a pretty firm belief that Kyle Neptune is not the last 10 years of Jay Wright. but like I think we can all agree with that, right? Like, and I think that if you expected that, that was kind of foolish. Now, I did think as a fan that like from a culture and personnel standpoint and talent standpoint, that there should be enough bullets on this roster to still be really good and almost lift the coach in the same way that that the 13 and 14 UConn teams lifted Kevin Ollie in those things. Like, and not to say that Kyle Neptune is as bad a coach as we learned Kevin Ollie would end up being, but that just like I just felt like Kyle Neptune would at the very bare minimum we would be walking away from the first 2 years of Kyle's tenure being like, okay, we're still kind of there, right? Like, and I feel like that was kind of what was in the head of a lot of the fan base, right? Like, and so starting this season 7-7 is like a massive letdown, right? So the Kyle thing is definitely like, and based on the context of this game, having not watched it, based on some of the personnel moves, etc., the transfer, which I write that off a little bit, but like the recruiting, which is definitely a concern for a lot of folks, and starting to get me included there, like that is something where I'm like, okay, like people are looking like, is this the recipe of an absolute disaster? Like, are we on the Georgetown path? And I feel like there is a lot of consternation in the fan base being like, oh no, we can't go there. Like, so like this guy isn't it, blah, 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 blah. It's still too early to make that call, guys. Sorry, like halfway, not even into a season, is too early to make that decision, right? Like, and Kyle was a green head coach when he was hired. And because he was green, he is going to have runway in this program. And stop thinking that Villanova. I realize that we've picked up a lot of fans, not we as the podcast, maybe a little bit, but like we as Villanova
the brand's
basketball,
grown. Yeah.
Have picked up a lot of fans who are not like as familiar with years and years of Villanova basketball and our whatever. So there's a lot maybe like of like Duke fans, like in a similar sense, like kind of like guys who have rode the bandwagon for the last 10 years. By the way, I love bandwagon fans. You're welcome aboard all the time, right? Like 100%. But like Villanova is still a 6,500 student small Catholic school outside of Philadelphia. Now, the expectations for the basketball program have raised dramatically, as have the facilities and everything that's come with it. And the banners and whatever would certainly lead you to believe that. And but the way the administration, the way the school runs, right? Like if you know the people, right? And this has been true forever, is that the school is going to hire someone that they're comfortable with, right? So absent a scandal of some sort that is really ugly, right? You're going to have to get used to the fact that Kyle Neptune is going to be the coach for years, right? And so I want to I just
at least 3 years.
I would say at least 3. Now, granted, that doesn't mean you can't criticize him. That doesn't mean you can't criticize him and like blame him for a loss, which it seems to me that it is. Granted, didn't watch, but like seems to me that it is a one shot at this, right? My attitude towards that is if he's getting 90% of it, roughly, start the kid, right? Like start the kid, right? So I'm on board with the personnel frustrations, right? Like I'm even on record of saying like, look, I think Chris Arcidiacono has improved a ton. I think he's earned his minutes to a large degree. I still would prefer seeing more Mark, right? Like I still would prefer seeing more Hausen because I think that is good for the long-term outlook of this team and program. And I do find it a little bit frustrating at times when we have to play 4-on-5 on offense. I get those criticisms. I don't think that's Kyle's fault. I think Kyle is dealing with a fucked up hand that he had to deal with Justin Moore being out. Now that problem should be resolved relatively soon, and we can get into that. But like, all I'm saying is this: criticize away. You want to be like, this one's on fucking Kyle, blah blah blah. I'm so frustrated. Like, he better get his act together. Blah blah blah. All that stuff. Say all that stuff. I'm on board, right? But like, the idea that like you're gonna just go on and rip tweets off on Twitter being like, Neptune sucks, this guy ain't it, this guy is fucking terrible. Like, guys, like, again, we've gone over this, but like there were dozens of instances in the Jay Wright tenure when that comment was made, right? And all those people looked foolish. 14 games in, asking for the coach's head, it's not only it's stupid, but not only stupid, it's pointless, right? Like, so I just can't. I got to address that because it's just so juvenile in terms of the fan base. Like, and I hate to say that because like our name for this podcast is like the fans' take on Villanova basketball. But like it's just like, guys, like, just level set here, right? Like,
this is not a reasonable expectation for our fan base. Like, Villanova is not going, we're not a fast moving institution. We're not just going to be like, oh, 14 games, we're only 7-7. Kyle's gone. Baker Dunleavy, you're up next. Whoever.
And if you're frustrated by that, like, I got news for you. Like, this is just and you're not used to that. Like, this is just the school that you've chosen to either attend or root for, right? Like, and that is what we do, right? Like, I can't, and it's worked more than it hasn't. So I hate to rehash that point, but like, again, I'm getting all these tweets being like, this guy's got to get fired, fire Neptune, hire Rick Pitino. Like, fuck, guys, we're never going to fucking hire Rick Pitino. It's not going to happen, right? Like this is the thing that like, I have to just, I got to ask everyone to pause and take a deep breath here. If this season's lost, still going to have to take a deep breath. But B, I'm not ready to jump off the train yet. So yeah.
I'm not going to be devil's advocate because I 100% agree with you. But there's three things I want to call out. One, this is for anyone who thinks about us going down the Georgetown path. We will not be going down that path because there is institutional support for basketball. I don't know if you mentioned that. My computer froze for a bit, but institutionally, there's support for basketball. It will, even if there's a down year, will come back, whether it's 3 years or whatever it looks like. There's just support for basketball. I think the thing that's frustrating or not even frustrating, but like what I've heard before the season and what I'm seeing now is super interesting. I felt like a lot, like you said, you talked about the UConn team from 13-14 being the rising tide that lifted Kevin Ollie up. People expected that for Kyle this year.
Yes.
And so with that, I think people were expecting that you weren't going to see how green he was because the team was going to be that good. Now, there's reasons why our team isn't doing that right now. The Moore injury, Whitmore being hurt. If Whitmore's back, we don't lose to Temple. We probably beat Michigan State, and like, let's say we take the Oregon game. I know that's not how it would work out, but we're sitting here and we're 10-4, and it's a different conversation. I get that. So what I think that people are, I don't know if they even recognize it, is they're frustrated because they're seeing how green Kyle is way before they thought they were going to recognize it. People expected, I always heard, the thing that people are going to judge Kyle on mostly is year 3 after he's had a couple of had a few cycles. And I think it's because they expected the team that we had is just going to keep running and running, and Kyle will be fine. It'll be a lifting tide, and then Kyle should be able to go in. That's not the case. This team isn't there yet. And so we're seeing how the warts in Kyle's coaching, because he's just like, it's game 14. It's game, honestly, from doing the math right, it's game 50 or 46 of his career. Fordham went 16 and 16. So he's coached 46, 32 plus 14. 46 games in his career up to this point. It's actually exactly 500, which is hilarious. But I think people are just recognizing and seeing that the warts that Kyle had 2 years prior, or 2 years earlier than they thought they were going to be able to see them. And I think what's frustrating is we're seeing these warts and we're like, oh, it's not like, and maybe this is what it is to be a young coach. It's not necessarily like I have a bad offensive scheme or I have a bad defensive scheme. Like, there's nothing wrong scheme-wise. It's in those key moments, not knowing when to take control or knowing how to put your best players in the best position to win. We still haven't used Cam in the best way possible. We are, and it might just be Kyle has no idea how to use Cam. It might be
sure. Counterpoint though, we have assistant coaches, right? And so like, this is my one question though. If Villanova was such a strong ship and maybe Jay just did way more and like those guys are really just like ornaments on the side that just kind of like hand out towels and yell at people once in a while and like slap guys on the ass when they do something good, right? Like maybe they're more like decorative than we actually thought. I don't think that's the case, but like, that's my only thing too, is like the other thought process when Kyle got hired was, oh, great. None of the assistant coaches left. None of them left. And so we assumed that, I think as a fan base, maybe incorrectly, right? And like, nobody likes to admit when they're wrong. And I think that's a big piece of this, right? Like we assumed, okay, and I know this is true of myself. So I was like, I saw the whole thing go down with Jay retiring, the disorganization, the timelines that didn't line up. Kyle gets hired. He's installed. Like shortly thereafter, all the head coaches stay, all the recruits stay. So we kind of like convinced ourselves that like it was going to be okay, and not be okay like, the season's just going to be okay, but like okay by Villanova standards, which means like we're still probably going to like win either the Big East regular season or the Big East tournament, right? Like we're going to go off on a run and, it's going to be, we're only going to lose a couple games total in the season. Like, okay by Villanova standards is also just like it's different. Yeah. It's not.
We expected it to be the 2019 season where we lost to Purdue in the second round. That's what I felt like people expected.
And so I think that, and it's funny because like, that's kind of what I thought. And then like, as I went through the summer and as like time went on and like, we got like more peaks at the team, I looked around and I was like, I am going to actually like level set with myself and like take my expectations from like here. They're not on the floor, but they're significantly lower for this team, right? Like you look around with the Justin Moore injury, then we found out Cam was hurt. Then we had injuries, like you said. Like, I just think that a lot of people are expecting a Jay Wright caliber coaching from a guy who, like you said, has literally only coached 50 games as a head coach total, 46 games total. And like, he did a good job at Fordham, but the competition at Fordham isn't the competition in the Big East. It's not an apples to apples comparison, right? Yeah. Like we had,
and especially at the coaching level, right? Like
exactly.
The guys drawing up plays, the guys with the clipboards on the other side of the court are not the guys who are in the Big East.
100%. And so like all of that goes into your evaluation of what this first year is going to look like. And I think a lot of people, like I said, I'm not saying like everybody's wrong and, like how terrible of you to be wrong, but like we were mistaken. We were mistaken in our evaluation of, and this is again, as fans who have really no inside knowledge of the program other than like, we all, like a lot of us went to school there and like kind of know how the program runs. And like, maybe we have some friends here and there, but like none of us are like insiders. So we're all forming these opinions based on the information that was being given. And to be honest, Villanova didn't give a lot of information either. So like, that's the other thing that we like, I think that there's also some like residual like upsetness or like anger or frustration with like how the whole thing played out with Jay to begin with that's being now directed at Kyle because Jay's not here anymore. Like you can't be mad at somebody who's not here anymore, who's like, because to be honest, like we talked about this on the last podcast, like the development clearly we didn't think it was an issue because we just kept winning, but the development of players was like definitely somewhat of an issue in Jay's like last year or two.
The Nana, we touched on the Trey Patterson, Nana, and Joker thing already.
Right.
Like the fact that
that's like the prime example.
Cannot see the floor. And by
even
the way,
spots like if
and
they had developed, it'd be spot situations where it's like, oh, we have UConn, we have someone, we need to throw someone on a Sonogo. Nana can give us 5 to 8 minutes.
Clinging even more than Sonogo, right? Yeah. Like because Dixon has Sonogo's number. Right?
Yeah. Like, so, but it's just the fact that we're seeing, and like we used Trey in that spot situation, like the backup wing situation for the first 5 games, but it was clear that's only because Cam wasn't playing, not because they felt that Trey was supposed to be in that spot.
Yep.
I look at it like from top to bottom, and I think we're seeing the warts way earlier than we thought we would see them. That's my full.
I would rather it that way though.
It's good. It sucks. Maybe it sucks now.
Maybe.
I mean, I get it with like, it's a little like, I am concerned about the recruiting area,
which is the next thing I wanted to hit.
And like, and that's the side of the complaints or the side of like the concerns from fans that like, I do agree with, where it's like, we kind of need to make the tournament this year just out of necessity when it comes to recruiting, in my opinion, right? Like we need to make the tournament to show that Villanova is still that high level program that players are going to get to come to, and like, they're going to develop, they're going to grow, and they're going to be in those positions that make for really compelling cases when it comes to the NBA draft. Like hands down.
You're right.
And so that is the part where of all of this that I'm like a little unsure about.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, like as a fan, I'm like, honestly, I'd rather have it be shitty now. And then like, if the payoff is, 2.5 years of good.
Yeah, but there's no rule that says being shitty now.
Yeah,
I know. I'm not saying
kept this train rolling, and
I don't know. I'm also like, I'm more of a pessimist than an optimist. I'm a realist. Let's be honest, but like, I don't know. I would rather like get something shitty up front and like,
you'd rather have your expectations managed earlier, right? I get that.
I would take the 2 years of fun.
Yeah, I would. I was rooting for the 2 years of fun, just to be clear. But like, I also did think that
I just hate fun. Sorry.
Enough juice, so to speak, in this program to kind of carry this thing for a couple of years. Kyle gets on the job training, which we knew he was going to need, right? But like the players there and everything going on, like carries this for a year or two. We have an outside chance at making a big run in this year in particular. And like, okay, program still rolling. Kyle can go out and sell himself as like, the next Hubert Davis type of guy who got like this, who kept the train rolling after the Hall of Famer head coach left. Right. Like, and that was kind of the play, right? Like that was kind of the angle that was going to get taken here. So like I definitely thought that. And look, I want to get to this. I'm still not jumping off the ship, right? Like, and like, so I want to sit there and say that because there's a couple things here that are changing. Number one, in theory, now this could go a very ugly direction even more quickly than we could have ever imagined. But in theory, the January schedule is manageable. That's one. Two, Justin Moore is in contact drills, right? Like, and like, that's like a sirens going off thing because the distance
Ryan with the
the distance from contact drills in practice to at least being a dressed participant in a game is not long.
Like next week. Like it's like
He could play on Wednesday.
He could play on Wednesday. If you were doing full contact drills in practice, he could play. Maybe they're still holding him out.
Now, is he going to be great? No, but we're going to have to go through that, right? Like, we're going to have to go through more kind of working his way back in. But, like, here's the thing. When Moore is back, right? Like, the Chris Arcidiacono consternation kind of, like, goes away overnight, right? Like, because Justin goes into the starting lineup.
They're still going to play him ahead of Mark, and people are still going to be angry.
That's going to be the question. And I don't think they should play him ahead of Mark. But I also do think that when you have more, right, like then your margin for error, so to speak, to allow a guy like a freshman in Mark and Cam to like make mistakes is that much bigger, right? Like you have a higher margin of error. You can allow them to make mistakes defensively and offensively because there is Justin Moore safety net. Now, granted, we don't know if Justin Moore is going to be 50, 60, 70, 80% of what he was in the past. But as we've said, 70% was the number that we were targeting. 70% of Justin Moore is the best point guard on this team, right? Like, so by far, right? So if we can get to 70, right? Like the sooner, the better. But if we can get to 70, then we are in some type of business here. Now, the issue is, are we going to run out of time? Now, I want to give the case for optimism because there's been a lot of pessimism, and I feel like I almost have I feel like it's almost an asset to me that I didn't watch the Marquette game. Like I really feel like this is an asset to me because I'm still working off of, we won 5 games. We had an 8-point loss against UConn where I thought we looked good. And from outside looking in, again, you tell me we lose by 2 to Marquette. Now, granted, it's at home, but losing by 2 to Marquette in a vacuum is not like terrible. So I'm looking at that and saying the 5-2 that we have been since Cam Whitmore's been back in this roster, and the fact that Cam Whitmore had a handful of pretty bad games in there, right? Like tells me that this team's floor is actually pretty solid, right? Like, and so going into getting Moore back, getting Whitmore now in the starting lineup, et cetera, that there is actually like a cause for optimism that we could actually go do that. Now, granted, is the coaching down the stretch in games going to continue to let us down is a narrative that we are going to have to monitor here going forward. But I am kind of on the train of like, okay, look at this schedule coming up, right? Georgetown is bad, right? Like now, granted, we have 2 games versus Georgetown in the next 5 and lose either of them. And you want to see ugly in the fan base. It's going to get really bad. Yeah. But you pick up 2, let's just say you pick up 2 wins there. You got at DePaul and at Butler. They have not, both of those teams, neither of those teams.
You skipped one. I don't know.
I know.
Okay.
I'm going to get back to that, but I'm saying that like you get those 2, right? So like that is, so I'm saying 11-7 now, right? That leaves, right? Did I do that math right?
Yeah, that's right.
Georgetown, DePaul, and Butler. Okay. 11-7. And then you say, okay, so you got Xavier this upcoming Saturday, big one. They're
Which
number 18.
I'm going to say that's the biggest. That's
this
the biggest
is the
game of the
game.
season. I think as of now, yes, and this will beating a. I don't know that we're going to have another shot to get another ranked team. I can't say that, but another ranked team at home. We'll get UConn at the Fin specifically. This is the chance to get a win versus a Xavier team that's going to be a top 6 seed in the tournament, barring the wheels completely falling off. This is the win that, like, if we are going to make the tournament, we need to have this on our resume. Yes. Marquette was a we should have it on our resume. We don't. It's no longer going to be there. This Xavier game is a need win. Like we need to win, or if we lose, we need to run the table after that. Like that's just those are the options.
Right. So then you look to the point. If we're sitting on the next podcast or the second to next podcast, whatever the hell, like and saying we're a 9-7 team, right? Like to me, it's like, okay, we're back in business here, right? Like we're immediately back in business, right? Like, right? Like, if I had to trade like a loss for a win, like trade the Marquette loss for a Xavier win, I would probably make that trade.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so then, okay, lay that out. Again, I said the 4 other games. Then the other 2 games that you have is at St. John's, which is at MSG, which, as far as home courts go, is
as close as you can get.
Is as reasonable of an away game as you're going to have.
Yeah.
St. John's has not looked good. Now they could get that ship righted, but it could also really fall. The wheels could fall apart. Like TBD on that team. But then you got Providence at the end of the month at home, and all of a sudden Providence looks like Providence again. Yeah. Like Cooley's got these guys rolling, right? So like basically in January, your options are, so I said the 4 games versus the quote unquote easy competition, add St. John's into that. That would put us at 12-7. And then you have Xavier and things. So you could get to 14-7 if you run the table in this month. So we have 7 games this month. You get to 14-7 if you run the table. At 14-7, this team is going to make the tournament, right? Like, so, but you figure a loss somewhere in there, right? Like, but you kind of need to go perfect with 1 loss, right? Like you have to get to 6-1. You have to get to 6-1 this month. That's how it has to happen, because Creighton's starting to figure things out. We see them twice in February. We got UConn looming at the end of the season. You got the game at the AMP, which is the dunk, right? Like in February. You have 2 Seton Hall games, which are not great, but like still, you have Butler again, DePaul again. So there is a couple winnable games in there. But like the February schedule is like, and at Marquette, right? Like, so like, and at Xavier. So the February schedule is hard as fuck, right? So like, we need to find a way to get to 6-1 this month. It has to be 6-1 has to be 13-8 at the end of this month is reasonable. And it's a reasonable expectation given the level of competition that we have. Willie, you seem to be like, no, we need to go 7-0. But I really do think that 6-1 is
like, I say that because I said the run the table comment, and like I don't mean that, but I just like think about building the resume, and short of like we can't lose games like Georgetown. We lose to Georgetown, and I myself will take care of this team. The season's over. I'll make sure of it. I will go down there and write a strongly worded letter. The DePaul Butler, like Butler's always going to be tough at Hinkle. That's just what it's going to be. But we got to come out of there. DePaul, you got to come out of there. I look at the resume games we have left. It's Xavier at home, Providence at home, Marquette away, Creighton away, and then we finish with
Creighton at home would still. I'm thinking Creighton at home will be a resume game when
it'll still get there. I'm just going in order, and then Providence away, Xavier away, and like I'm counting Providence away as a loss. I'm counting Xavier away as a loss. Like the way I think about it is, if we don't win this game at home versus Xavier, we have to go on the road and get a win versus either Providence, Xavier, or Creighton.
Or Marquette, yeah.
Or Marquette, which we never win at Marquette. That just doesn't happen. Like, I think the 2018 team did it, and like maybe one other. That's always a tough place for us to win. The level of importance those games gets, it's already going to be amplified. It's going to be like 10x if we don't win at home versus Xavier. If we can't protect the Finn.
I guess my one point there is we've made the Justin Moore point. He's in contact drills in December, right? Like, so my point is that by February, I think it's reasonable that by February, we're getting close to the best version of Justin Moore that we're going to see for the season, right? Like, so that's kind of like what's playing in the back of my head is that changes a lot of things.
It does, but it's also like to the point of my entire point is like every mistake is amplified to where like, let's say Justin isn't back till after Xavier. Then it's like, oh, well, we lost that game, but now Justin's back. But now we're 8-8, and now we're still without Justin. It's the level of like, we can't depend on Justin being back. We know he's going to, we assume he's going to come back and he's going to be at 70 to 85%, and we're going to be able to start rolling. But like, what if that first game back, it's just still a little bit weird and it's not normal, and then we get clipped at Butler? It's like these are the games where it's like we need to get the resume wins before it happens or before Justin's there, because as of right now, our resume is a like decent Oklahoma win and a bunch of like crap losses. Like that's just what it is.
Agreed. We don't have a resume right now. We don't have a resume. Like it is like at the end of the UConn or St. John's game and the UConn game too, because of the way we looked, like analytically, we were starting to creep onto the very back end of like bubble out, right? Like very back end of it.
Yeah.
We were starting to creep out. I saw like Lunardi posted like deep, like he was going like 12, 13 teams deep and was saying like, oh, there's Villanova there at like spot 90, right?
Yeah.
Like, so like, yeah, we were a deep bubble, but like we were getting there. The Marquette game is obviously a setback, but again, metrics wise and all the things that build thing, like it's not a devastating loss. It's just it could have been a stamp win that gives us a margin of error later. I get all of that, right? Like, but man, I do think that we can beat the Xavier team at home. I mean that because we have looked decent in a lot of these games. So
that gets to my next point is the positive spin I have is in our last, since Cam came back, but excluding Oklahoma, our defensive efficiency has gotten better. Like if we're looking at a scale, it's gone up in the way that it's gone down. Like we're becoming more efficient defensively. We had our best defensive game of the year versus St. John's. Versus Connecticut, we had a really good defensive game. Like we are getting better and better defensively. If you look at like a Ken Pom or T rank, it's like we were having adjusted defensive efficiency of like over 100, which for all intents and purposes translates to we were letting up more than a point per possession. Like for all intents and purposes, that's what it means. We're now in the 90s. St. John's in the 80s. We held UConn to 92. Like we're getting better defensively. Somehow offensively, we're still clicking, despite looking like weird on offense. So it's trending in the right way, like you're saying. It's just we can keep trending analytically, but if we don't walk out with the resume, it's not going to matter.
It has to. I agree wholeheartedly. Have to agree, right? Like because every other time that happens, that we have another loss, another lump, and whatever, is that much more that we got to be fucking awesome when more comes back, right? Like to convince the committee that hey, this is a different team. You know what I mean? Like so. I am,
or win the Big East tournament.
That's always the path. That's always the path is to win the Big East tournament. Is always out there.
It's always Plan B.
But that's not what we should expect. I still am of the opinion that we should expect an NCAA tournament run. So, or NCAA tournament berth at the very least. So
I agree with that.
Look, I think the answer is 6-1 in January. I still think that provides enough of a margin for error, and still there's enough opportunities on the docket in February and early March and in the Big East tournament to do enough to get the resume there. But like you start looking at 5-2 and it's like fucking hey, 12-9. Like that's such a path because you got to get to like 19-20 wins. And it's just like, they're just running out of daylight. So I am of the opinion that 6-1 has to be the bare minimum. You tell me at the end of the month that we're 13-8, that means that we probably beat, I don't know, one of Xavier and Providence, who are probably both going to make the tournament, and didn't lose a game that we should have won, right? And like that might be enough to put us into a position where, okay, now we can start rolling in a very difficult schedule, but with a much better team, given that now some people have just said like, oh, Justin Moore, like it's just one player, right? And yeah, he's Justin Moore, but you don't know how good he is. You don't know how good he's going to be, whatever. Villanova, point guard,
the ripple effect is huge.
The ripple effect is dramatic.
And even Kyle said, I think Kyle said this in a press conference too, when he was like asked about Moore, he's like, we've incorporated him into our game prep. And like, that's why you're seeing a better like at least defensive set. Like that's why you're seeing like, and even Caleb, I think Caleb was quoted as saying like, he looks like he's like 20 pounds stronger than he was. Like, granted, I don't know if that's just Caleb like hyping up his boy, whatever. But, you know, the confidence and the pain points that it alleviates on this team goes a lot farther, right? It like to your point, right? We don't have to be starting Chris Arcidiacono. That issue goes away overnight. It also, to an extent, probably quiets the fan base a little bit. Gets everybody to like chill the heck out. And that's like, these guys are on social media. Whether or not they should be is a different question, but they are. And they see it, right? Like they see, and Kyle, I'm sure, is probably, I mean, I'm sure not caring because he's collecting a nice paycheck, but like, I think he, you know, when you quiet the fan base a little bit and have a second to like center yourself and like really like be with your team, like, it makes a difference. Like, it just makes a difference in your mentality, and you're not hearing negative things about yourself every single day of the year. Like, it makes a difference. And so Justin coming back will be a huge boon. I agree with Willie too, where every game we lose now puts more pressure on us late in the season when our schedule is harder. And I agree and so by logic, I also agree with Chris's point. Like, we need to win in January. Like, January needs to be a very strong month, with or without Justin Moore. Like, we got to figure it out. Like, we can't bank on him coming back at all, and we can't bank on him saving the day either, because that's a lot to ask of one guy. But when he does come back, it will alleviate a lot of those issues that seem to plague our team right now.
Yeah.
And I also am just personally excited to see like a Justin Moore, Cam Whitmore, like Mark Armstrong. Like, how do you not get excited just like thinking about that? Like, I don't know. I'm like, that just seems to me it's going to be Eric Dixon, like our big man. Come on. That's going to be an awesome thing to watch.
It should be a lot of fun.
Hopefully,
emphasis on should. Should is doing a lot
hopefully we're in a position to actually enjoy it. But like,
right.
You know, like I'm thinking about that. And I'm like, that's an awesome team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I agree. I think we've said enough here. I'm saying the cause for optimism. I also can understand the pessimism, right? Like, at the same time, like, again, I go back to pre-Oklahoma, post-Oregon. Like, you told me 5-2 was the result there, and I probably would have said, yes, sign me up. So I'm trying to look at the bigger picture and saying, okay, obviously the non-con and the November and December were a disaster on a number of respects. But given where we got to when we entered December, getting to 7-7 by the end of the month was kind of like the good enough, kind of in that good enough category. I probably thought that we would have lost Oklahoma and beaten Marquette, but whatever. Like, you know, you got to the 7-7 number. So we got this team back to 500 after the fucking terrible start that we had. So I'm kind of the like, okay, let's try and reset because to the point here, the negativity, right? Like, and I'm not saying that the fans are causing losses or anything like that. Like, the game is 94-50, right? Like, it's not us, but like the negativity like permeates, right? Like, it's kind of a thing. So let's just take it where it is, 7-7. Like, let's New Year's resolution, like, go be 6-1 in January, right? Like that's got to be the goal here. So like, get mentally right, have a good shooting performance versus a crap team in Georgetown, and like start to feel yourself a little bit, because like then we can get going, right? And like get into it, because you have a ranked game versus a team that just beat UConn. So like the opportunity is right there right now. And after that effort, you have a little bit of a reprieve because you get the Paul Butler Georgetown back to back, right? Like, you have an opportunity there. Like, we have to go away. We have to find a way to take advantage of that opportunity. 6-1 is the goal in this month.
Listen, if Rutgers can beat Purdue, which just happened.
They did win.
They did
pulled it
win
out.
60, I think 65, 64.
I was checking that, and then also
Purdue hates being number one playing Rutgers.
if Rutgers can beat Purdue, we can beat Xavier. Dare I say, we may even be able to beat UConn if we are at full strength and firing on all cylinders.
I agree.
So
I like that. Now, awards.
yes.
I don't have a lot, but I think we got to go back to Maddie Siegrist. Right? Like,
she's definitely.
Let's go, baby. Yeah. Sorry, even my dog is excited.
Maddie Siegrist passed Scotty Reynolds in terms of all-time Villanova leading scorers, and now only trails Kerry Kittles and Shelley Pennefather for the all-time Villanova scoring title. And I think she's averaging something like 28 or 29. 28 points a game, which is fucking crazy. Interestingly, I don't hear her name being called as like player of the year type shit yet, but I feel like you keep putting up 28 points a game and you kind of have to at some point. But I do feel like the women's game like revolves around these big name players like Caitlin Clark at Iowa or whatever.
Ozzie Fudd at UConn.
Yeah, Ozzie Fudd at UConn. Angel, or if it wasn't
Reese
her, it would have been it would have been Paige. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got these big names in the women's sport. And I feel like Maddie kind of just Villanova is not as big of a program on the women's side, so like you don't hear.
That's exactly
name.
what it is. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
But at some point, if she shoots us 28 to 30 points a game into the NCAA tournament, like she's got to be on the list.
Yeah.
So
I have no idea like what her plans are. I am intrigued as to whether or not she's like interested in going to the WNBA. Like,
she's on WNBA draft boards. Like, there's interest in her. But
that would be awesome. I would love to go but I want a Maddie Siegrist jersey whatever team she ends up on. Like,
completely, yeah.
I want a Maddie Siegrist jersey. I'd buy one immediately. I will say, so we all know that Maddie Siegrist is Alpha Dog of the Year. It's already been decided. Sorry. But there were, in the first half, there were two absolutely sick plays by our freshmen. Cam had it was Cam, right? He had a huge slam dunk in like the first half.
We were dunking the ball a lot, which was absurd.
We dunked the ball a lot. And that's why I was excited. I was like, cool, we're running. We're getting out in transition, like going back to everything we said earlier. So Cam had that one. And then literally not that many possessions later, Mark is like, okay, this is a dunk contest now. And he goes up and does something ridiculous. Yeah. And so it's kind of a toss up for me. I feel like I want to give it to Mark because I feel like, Cam's going to get plenty of chances. But I know Mark is strong and athletic, but he's still kind of skinny. For a skinny guy, he is very athletic. And so I saw that, and I think that was maybe one of the first times I've seen him really explode. And I just loved it. I was more of that, please. So I'm gonna give it to Mark.
So Mark had two. One was a fast break dunk where he went up, but the big one for me was in the second half where he drove baseline. A person contested him. And it wasn't a reverse dunk, but he kind of just dunked from underneath the basket.
Yeah, he snuck, snuck in and was boop.
And it was very casual, but it's actually a really high degree of difficulty play that he just did. So that would be mine. Cam's dunks were thunderous, but they were both fed off of from people, and then he just rose up because he's Cam.
Mark really exploded and created for himself. So I would give those those would be the Shaq Fit play of the games.
Just Mark for sure.
And then Alpha Dog, I don't know.
It's definitely Maddie. I mean, that's just what it is.
Maddie's Alpha Dog until someone unseats her, in my personal opinion.
I mean, Maddie had 35 on yesterday. So
I know. She also, interestingly, is now she's in top 5, I think, rebounders as well.
Oh, really?
She had I saw a stat on Villanova women's basketball Twitter, I think, or she has 900 rebounds on her career. She's the only the 5th person in Villanova basketball history to have 900 rebounds. So she just feels she's a walking stat sheet. It's incredible.
She leads the country in scoring and is
Yeah.
Very close to 50, 40, 90.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
It's absolutely outrageous.
It's crazy.
All right. I think we've covered enough. We didn't do a full-throated Xavier preview, but I feel like
Georgetown. We didn't talk about
Primo Spears.
Primo Spears is good. Brandon Murray, if we lose, I'm gonna.
If you want to go to a Villanova game, probably the ticket and the travel to get to the Georgetown game will cost you less than going to something at the Wells Fargo Center.
Oh, completely.
So, highly recommend.
I want to play a game right here. What is it? What's a Villanova Georgetown ticket going for on SeatGeek right now?
$2. You have to be able to get in the door for get in the door price.
Yeah.
Okay, not including fees.